I found my cousin spooning a 15-year-old girl in my parents' house. I tried to kick him out, but my family is siding with him. What do I do? This happened last Friday/Saturday and I'm still fuming and confused by the reactions of everyone involved. So, context. I am living at my parents' house and my cousin came to stay here last Friday. He'd moved to another country a few years ago, so this was our first time seeing him in quite some time. He'd been like a brother to me all my life, so I was initially looking forward to hanging out with him, and he wanted to contribute to bills while he's here anyway. I then found out from my mother that he'd be bringing a girl with him who's working with him on a project, and that they'd be staying here as a change of environment and to chill out. I thought pretty weird, but alright, and didn't question it further. They arrived Friday and I found out why my mother said girl instead of woman. His co-worker is 15. We were all shocked upon learning this and there were a lot of awkward silences at first, but he explained that she was working with him on a game and that her parents had given the green light for her to travel with him. Apparently she and him have been living under the same roof for around a year. We collectively kind of just accepted it, laughed it off and left it at that. Internally though, I had a gross feeling which was further justified by the fact that they acted like they were on a honeymoon. She's very clingy to him, constantly gives him a sort of doe-eyed look when he talks. I originally thought it was just because English isn't her first language, but she speaks perfectly good English. Another thing I noticed was that she was wearing a necklace that was halfway between a choker and collar, that when I asked her about it, she looked at my cousin, smiled, and said it was a gift from him. So, fast forward to Friday night and before we go for drinks, we're figuring out sleeping arrangements since there'd be a total of 8 people in the house now, including my siblings. Originally we were going to let my cousin and the girl, I'll call her A from here on, take the couch and airbed in the living room, but after finding out A is a child, I offered to give her my room and I'd take the airbed, while my cousin would take the couch. She refused no matter how much I reassured her, and said she'd like the airbed. I tried suggesting a bunch of different ideas, including her having the living room to herself, but she was insistent on my cousin being there with her. I really felt uncomfortable about this, but my parents and one of my siblings brushed it off. My 2 other siblings were as weirded out by this as me, but what could we do? At least they were going to be sleeping separately. Everyone goes to the pub, except A, my cousin, neither drink, and my mother. She works Friday nights, so my cousin and A were home alone. They said they'd watch a movie and go to sleep. I tried to forget about it and just enjoy the night, but I couldn't stop worrying. I ended up drinking a lot. Here's where it went from 0 to 100. A lot of the details are fuzzy from the beers, so bear with me. We all come back home around 2 a.m. and we find them both asleep on the airbed, spooning and cuddling. It felt like walking in on a crime scene, but at least that would have a more straightforward reaction. My dad and siblings are whispering, discussing what to do next, but I just snap. I yell at my cousin and wake him up. I grab a cushion off of the couch and knock him back with it, and ask him what the hell he's doing. A gets up and wraps herself around him, and tells me to leave him alone. He steps off the bed and tries to calm me down, telling me to let him explain. I swat his arm and yell at him, saying that there's no just reason for a 24-yo man to be cuddling a 15-yo girl he's not related to. At one point I heard him say we're wearing pajamas. Eventually I get him to the door, push him outside, lock it and take the key. A tries to take it and starts crying, all the while yelling at me to let him back inside. Everyone else is trying to calm me down, saying that I'm not thinking straight and that I need to sit down and sober up while they handle it. They convince me to give the key to A, who rushes to the door and brings my cousin back inside and starts hugging him. My brother and one of my sisters leads me to the kitchen while my dad and other sister talk with A and my cousin. I don't know what was said, but they told me it's been sorted out and to head up to my room. The next morning we talked during breakfast, and I found out that A and my cousin went back to the airbed after the argument. I got mad and asked why the hell they were still sleeping in the same bed, and my dad literally said they're just clothes. When my mother came home and found out, she told me basically the same thing, and said that we've known my cousin for most of our lives, that we should trust him. I still can't comprehend it, and yet everyone's moved on already. In fact, some of my family is annoyed at me about how I reacted. I feel like I'm in a Twilight Zone episode. I apologized to A, but she said to save it for my cousin, who I refused to give an apology to. What do I do? Is there anything I can do? Comment. Poor girl, even if you go to the police, your family will probably deny it. SMH. Everyone is failing this child, including her own parents. Unfortunately, you just need solid evidence, outside of the very obvious sub-collar this literal child is wearing. Typing that out made me sad AF. Your family must be in on this, I'm sorry. OP also said that she speaks perfectly good English. I'm betting he took her out of her home country, that he was residing in for years. She's in a different country, away from her parents. Big red flags for human trafficking. Has anyone asked this girl where her parents are and how they can be contacted? Is she in a troublesome or dangerous situation at home? Your parents have a minor child mysteriously staying with them and they need to ask follow-up questions. Yep, that was my first thought too. They have a submissive/dominant relationship, which, like you said, between adults is one thing, but she's a child. She is only 15 now, but how old was she when they got together? Because you don't start wearing a collar on the first date. Ew. The whole thing is creepy and I don't understand why OP is the only one who is freaking out about it. The girl already has an unnatural attachment to him. The whole thing is just gross. My family is a bunch of wonderful people too that let my brother-in-law molest half the girls in my family and stood around and did nothing because he was family. Now I'm a 33-year-old finally going to the cops because my therapist had to report it to the state. Don't let this girl become me, who had to face all this 25 years later. Can you find her parents' contact information and tell them there is something physical going on between them? If not, I'd honestly consider calling CPS. If her parents are okay with the situation and the age of consent is higher than her age, go nuclear and bring the authorities into it. CPS for child neglect on behalf of the parents, possibly the police as well. Your family are not awesome people. They're enabling child abuse. Take photos. Check if you're in a two-party consent state, but either way, set up hidden cameras. It's your house, so I think you have surveillance rights within it. If the evidence is legally inadmissible, whatever, it's proof for police in case your family lies, and visual evidence for prosecutors and future victims. Send it to A's family. If you're making everyone uncomfortable, good. If they leave, good. If you're forced to leave, at least you're not around and didn't facilitate sexual abuse against a minor. You can tell A that is nothing personal, but no adult man should be treating her this way. Child victims overbond to their abusers, and need to be rescued against their will frequently. The more traumatized you are, the more you can cling to the familiar and the more tendency to escape into fantasy. The truth is that she may not realize your cousin was abusing her until he discards her. The submissive collar is a serious red flag about the power dynamics that attract your cousin, and I'd bet on this problem continuing for him. You're the only one in your family who did the right thing. Stay loud and stay angry. Anger is a gift. Don't say they're wonderful people. They're allowing a grown man to groom a fucking child. Not just grooming, he's having physical contact with a 15-year-old. Your parents are for thinking this is acceptable. Story 2. Parents stopped talking to me after getting married and moving away. Next steps? Hi. Some background info. I used to be incredibly close to my parents, especially my mom. This changed when I got engaged in June 2021 and things started going downhill with my parents. My parents seemed to be disappointed in the engagement ring, not a real diamond, the type of wedding we were planning, elopement style with only parents invited and not a huge hall thing, my husband and his family not being as well off. seemingly everything. During this time period my parents' expectations were difficult to manage and they often said rude things to my now husband and I. A side note but somewhat relevant, my parents are immigrants and started out with just the shirts on their back. Neither of them completed high school because they had to work. Growing up, we didn't have much and my parents sacrificed everything they could so my siblings and I could have a better future. Because of this, there was never an option for my siblings and I to be average. We were all pushed towards university and had to make something of ourselves. Now that my parents are in their 60s, all their saving and penny pinching has paid off in the sense that they have millions from investments. This is mostly from real estate that has skyrocketed in value and generates income from rent. Back to the unfolding of events. During our engagement, my fiancé and I decided we couldn't afford housing in our HCOL city, renting and owning was too expensive. We told our parents that we're going to move to some place affordable after we get married but if they want to help us stay near them, we'd need help with a down payment so that we could afford a mortgage. My husband's parents said no but that they'll support us in our move. Mostly because we'd need an incredible amount of money to have a mortgage be affordable on our salaries. My parents offered us one of their rentals at a slight discount. We were happy with the options but ultimately decided moving to a cheaper city was our best option. Plus, we didn't want my parents as landlords. This was the needle that broke the camel's back. In June 2022 we got married. And in August 2022 we moved across the country to another major city that was much more affordable and had jobs in our industries. After moving, my parents slowly stopped answering my phone calls and texts. When they did answer, they were short and didn't have many positive things to say. Typically they'd just ask when we were moving back. It was in February 2023, after trying to reach out and not getting callbacks I finally decided to stop chasing after them. In return they still to this day have not called me. I never expected them to enact a silent treatment and this, I feel, has really gotten out of hand. My siblings have told me that my parents will never reach out to me and they're pissed. I don't really know what I would say if I call them up. Or if they'd answer. I'm not really sure how to mend this fence. Any advice on what to do next? My thoughts are to try and reach out so all this craziness can stop. I'm not sure what they'd be receptive to other than me moving back. If an olive branch doesn't work, then I'm content to put this to rest and just move on. TLDR, parents are mad I moved across the country after getting married and stopped talking to me. I miss my parents and want them back in my life. What is the best step forward? Edit, wow this took off more than I expected. Thank you for the replies. Some info to add / things I want to clarify. My husband isn't poor. He makes above the national average. However, to live comfortably in my hometown you need to possibly be a millionaire. My parents moved to Canada as children with their families, not as adults. It wasn't their decision. Comment. Your parents will definitely pop back up in your life if you have a baby. Then they'll demand to see the grandchild and act confused when you're not comfortable with them. Sadly this OP. If you and your husband are planning on having children, just bide your time. There are a number of Reddit stories I have read where the parents completely disown a child for one reason or another, then when they find out they have grandchildren all of a sudden want to be back in their kid's life. And yes, there are a lot of whining posts. I disowned my kids and now that they have kids they are not letting me be near my grandkids. Whine, whine, whine. Talk with your siblings about this, but from what I could glean from your story they took your refusal of their offer of an apartment, which you did ask for as condition of staying, as a personal affront, which you stated you didn't want your parents as landlords. I would try and have the siblings relay back to the parents that this was far from the case and that it was a combination of cheaper rent and better jobs that meant the two of you will be much better set on your future career and financial path. Right. If they're making bank in this real estate economy, they know exactly how expensive it is to even rent, much less own in your area, and the discrepancy between that and your salary. So sorry that they are not handling your independence well, but you choose wisely in not letting them have a handle in your life when they weren't being supportive. The best you can hope for now is to make your success independent from them as well. My guess is that they immigrated from a country where there's a lot more focus on extended family, and moving away would be very strange/unusual. And so their values are probably quite different than ops on this matter. It's hard. If you move to another country, you can't then expect your kids that you raise there to not adopt some of the values of the country that you immigrated to. It's an old story. Perhaps you have relatively normal parents. Congratulations! Sadly, that's not the same experience for a lot of people, seemingly OP included. Some parents see their children as extensions of themselves and need to be controlled, directed, and managed in the manner the parents decide is correct. And, horror of horrors, should the child not comply, irrespective of the child's age, the child needs to be punished. The silent treatment is one form of coercive control. Seems ops parents are particularly skilled in it. Coupled with some attempts at financial control. Cutting ties is probably the best way to respond. And I don't think it's the easiest, just one way to explore how you want to live. I'm impressed that you stuck to your values and did what was best for you and your husband. I'm not sure what to do to bridge the gap, but do agree that they will be reaching out when you have children. All this must have been incredibly disappointing. We shouldn't expect unconditional love from parents, but few parents would impose these conditions, total control to just keep in touch. It's cruel. I don't know if I would trust them with my child/children. They are not kind people, and even if this gets smoothed over, there will be more opportunities for them to want to assert their control as life moves forward. It's sad, and I don't relish giving my opinion here. I would spring for a therapy session and ask a professional what they suggest. Do this before you have children.